Hi guys, today I'm once again going to talk about speaker isolation fit. And these are AUVA 70. And there's a bit of a funny story behind all of this. When I was first contacted by Stack Audio to review their isolation fit, they mentioned the whole line, 50s, 70s, and 100s. Bigger number means bigger fit physically, as you can see, and also more of that same material that makes isolation and dampening and whatever. I'm not a physics expert. And I deliberately chose the smallest model, AUVA 50, because that was the one that I thought if it works really good, I can afford that one. The pricier ones are quite rich for my blood. So I chose 50, I reviewed it, I really liked it, and at the end of that review I mentioned that I don't even want to try 70s, that a friend of mine offered, because I have a suspicion they would be great, but given their pricing, I would just cry myself to sleep. So nice people from Stack Audio took pity on this YouTube hobo and they said like, we would like to gift you AUVA 70, like no strings attached. You don't need to do a review or anything. We would just like you to have them as our gift to you and use them and let us know if you like them. So here they are, and I'll try to answer the question, is bigger always better? My grandpa certainly believed that. He gave me advice how to look for a girlfriend, and he said, the bigger, the better. It means she comes from a wealthy family, with big cellars filled with cheese, wine, etc. And I suppose that philosophy makes sense for a person who lived through Second World War. But let's see if the logic is sound for isolation fit too. So just like it was the case with AUVA 50, AUVA 70 are also really well made. They're made out of metal and they're black. On the bottom you can choose to have felt or 3 spikes to ground them. I chose felt because I have parquet floor and I like to move my speakers and my stands around the room when I change gear and I try to fine-tune things. And this felt is really sliding nicely over a parquet floor. So that's it. In terms of just size, they're equally tall, which is interesting, as AUVA 50, but they're much wider, they have bigger radius, and they're definitely more than double the size. So I waited for a friend of mine that was coming for us to listen to my system and some music, so he can help me with removing AUVA 50 and putting AUVA 70. And we do that one evening, and we sit back onto the couch to listen to some music, and he immediately says, well, this is slightly wider and airier sound with more natural vocals. I agree with him, of course, but what I noticed immediately too is slightly leaner and thinner sound throughout the mid-bass and bass line. But I was not worried about that at all because I experienced the exact same thing with a freshly mounted AUVA 50, and it's a thing of settling those physical particles that are doing isolation and dampening. They're settling, and it takes around 8 hours in total for them to fully settle, and then that mid-bass and bass leanness go away. You are left with, once again, full and very authoritative bass line, but it just has a bit more control. And as my friend noticed, the soundstage is slightly wider, airier, and what he called more natural vocals and instruments, I would describe a bit more in terms that all instruments and vocals do have a bit more fine details that you can distinguish. So for example, if we talk about vocals, they do have nicer, more obvious inner tone detailing. And just the color of someone's voice and the textures, all of that becomes slightly more obvious. With instruments, it's a very same thing. With wind instruments especially, they're naturally windy sounding, but it does go for everything else to some extent. Transients are slightly quicker, more detailed, more precise in space, and that's basically it. slight detail elevation, better controlled, more textured, and more intentful, is that even a word? Bassline that hits more precise with more intent, and then a bit wider and airier soundstage. And that was the exact same thing that I heard when I put AUVA 50 for the first time. But this time I already had AUVA 50, then I just moved to 70, and I heard the exact same thing. So a few days later, when these settled fully, I go back and I put 50s once again. And I do notice that slight congestion of the soundstage and there, and just a bit thicker and hazier tones overall. It's a small difference, but it's definitely noticeable. Then I go back from AUVA 50s to just my usual spikes with stainless steel feet beneath them, and there you go. Once again, even more congestion, and tones become like more dense but less revealing. They're even hazier with even less of that inner tone detailing and texture, and transients and nice edges and small details become slightly blurry and hazy. So what I can tell you from this is that basically the same amount of improvement you get by going from just your good old spikes to AUVA 50, the exact same thing is happening once again by going from 50 to 70. And that kind of change is very similar to what you would experience going from a very decent, let's say $500 DAC like topping E70 Velvet to a very decent $900 DAC like topping D93. And then that would be from spikes to AUVA 50. And then going to 70 would be like going from topping D93, which is a mighty good deck already and very revealing, to something like, I don't know, Gustar Day 26 or Holo Audio Cyan 2. And you get even more space, even more refinement, and in absolute terms, the difference is not huge, but you do notice it and you do appreciate it, and the more you get used to it, the more difficult it is to go back. What can I say? My advice about this would be that if you are in that good position, in that lucky position in your life, that you can think about having just speaker isolation feet that cost this much. That also means that the rest of your system is already really fine. And if you have that really fine system, when you get into the situation that you cannot invest $200 or $300 or $400 and get a better piece of gear, but you have to think in terms of thousands. For example, you have a great DAC like Holo Audio Cyan 2 that is around $1,200–$1,400 depending on the market, and you cannot elevate that sound by investing several hundreds. We are now starting to count in thousands. And the same goes for really good speakers. At one point, if you have a speaker that's 1500s or 2000s, you cannot just add 500s and buy a better speaker. You usually have to double it to notice the difference. At that point, if you're still hungry for more resolution, more air, more bass control, these start to make a lot of sense. So my advice is be realistic and logical about it. Don't go and try to enrich a very budget system with expensive isolation feet. Your money would be invested better in speakers or amplifier or preamplifier, etc. But if you already have a great system and you still yearn from some improvements, and some of us audiophiles, we always do, it's not a thing that we acquire and forget, it's a continuous hobby. At one point, I would strongly suggest to stop and think about, instead of investing thousands in a new, fancy, shiny, huge and heavy piece of gear, stop and think about trying these feet, and they come with 30-day return policy. So if you don't hear the difference, if you don't like the difference, but they're definitely worth a try. By the way, one more story for the end. I recently borrowed AUVA 50s to a local patron of my channel, and he used them with CAF LS50 metas and their own factory stand. He used them beneath the stand the same way I did. And he is also using two REL T7X subwoofers and Burkhardt something integrated amplifier. I'm sorry, I forgot the exact model. But he used AUVA 50s, and he also noticed, as he described it, small but noticeable difference. And he said that after removing them to give them back, he noticed slight lack of precision and resolution, like everything became just slightly hazier. In his words, these did not change the tonality of his system. They do not play tricks by emphasizing highs or something like that he expected they will do, but they actually just clarify the sound a bit. And even though it's not a huge difference, I believe that he is currently contemplating if he's going to get 50s or 70s. But not getting any is obviously not an option. And with that, I hope you like this video. See you next time.